Welcome to the plenary session of Diversity and Inclusion in the Latin America Legal Profession. For those of you in New York, I trust you enjoyed catching up with some new people at lunch. For the lawyers joining us from across Latin America through our live streaming, a very warm welcome to you. I'm Judy Hargrave, one of Philip Morris International's 300 legal professionals who operate across 180 countries worldwide. My focus is Latin America. Of these 300 legal professionals, 52% are females, and 40% of our senior positions, senior counsel to general counsel, are females. Philip Morris International is transforming as a company. However, it's not only about our products becoming smoke-free, it's also about how we engage and operate, both internally and externally. To continue to be a highly successful multinational, we must learn to be open to different perspectives, to learn new ways of working, and to challenge the status quo. Diversity and inclusion is an important element of this transformation journey. We need to create a culture that values different opinions and offers opportunities to all to contribute. At the same time, we need to recognise and address our blind spots and barriers that prevent full participation and missed opportunities. We also want to work with like-minded suppliers and service providers, including the law firms with whom we work, who also value and embrace diversity and inclusion. In fact, we simply want our lawyers to be as diverse as our customers and consumers. Today, Philip Morris International, together with Mondelez International, Walmart, GE, and Honeywell International, who you'll hear from in our first panel, the Vance Center's Women in the Profession program, the New York City Bar Association, the Institute for Inclusion in the Legal Profession, and our four sponsors, Shook Hardy & Bacon, Hunton & Williams, Kirkland & Ellis, and Baker & McKenzie, who you'll hear from in our second panel, and Latin Lawyer and the Latin American Corporate Counsel Association, who are covering the event, are all delighted that you have joined us to hear about and exchange views on how we can foster our efforts in diversity and inclusion, which we believe will create working environments where all of our employees have the opportunity to contribute at their best, and at the same time build forward-looking, highly successful and sustainable businesses. Why join together? As Wangari Maathai of the Greenbelt movement said, one person can make a difference, but when many join together with a common goal, there is hardly any limit on what a group can accomplish. So I'm very proud to be involved in this event where lawyers from different countries and different sectors, business, not-for-profits and private practice, can come together to share learnings and experiences so that we can identify and implement effective practices to foster and embed diversity and inclusion. In fact, in this room, there are lawyers from 13 different countries across Latin America. So congratulations. To provide both the corporate and legal firm perspectives, we have put together panels to address what corporate clients consider when measuring, assessing, and evaluating diversity and inclusion efforts within law firms, how to leverage metrics to guide firms and companies towards inclusion and identify where bias may hinder diversity efforts, described by one of our law firms as an eye-opener. We also want to give you the opportunity to delve into various strategies to combat implicit bias and promote diversity and inclusion, such as sensitivity training, flexible work programs, inclusion and retention efforts, amongst others. When you registered, you would have received a sticker and a card This sets out the breakout session that you'll be joining, and you'll be given further directions on this later. Your sticker is on your name tag as to the group number. Before the breakout session, we have the honour of hearing from Ambassador Mari Carmen Aponte, one of the few Latinas to serve as a United States ambassador when she was ambassador to El Salvador under President Barack Obama. We will learn how she overcame the barriers facing a female Latina lawyer to establish a distinguished career. To end the event, we'll have an awards ceremony and reception at which a number of Latin American law firms will be presented awards for their efforts to embrace and foster diversity and inclusion. And now some thanks. I want to thank the person who inspired this initiative, Philip Morris International's Luisa Menezes. An enormous thank you to you. I also have an enormous thank you to my awesome, hard-working co-conveners, Adriana Ospina and Sandra Yamate. Adriana, your agility and care over every detail and working with all the panels was phenomenal. Thank you. Again, thank you to our four sponsors, Shukhardi and Bacon, Hunton and Williams, Kirkland and Ellis, and Baker and McKenzie for demonstrating their wholehearted support to this initiative. As I've said before, we could not be here without you. And a special thanks to Alex Boshkova Bordage from Shukhardi and Bacon for her amazing event designs, which you see displayed around the venue, and her tireless efforts to produce them. And to Amy Nielsen and Nick White from Hunton and Williams for their tireless efforts to promote the event and seamlessly handle all of the registrations. So from me, I hope that you'll find the program enriching, and now I invite Sandra Yamate to make her remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Executive Officer of a group called the Institute for Inclusion in the Legal Profession. We're a charitable organization, and although we're based in Chicago, our work takes us not only around the U.S., but around the world. And we're really excited to have a chance to be part of this inaugural effort to bring the profession together to talk about diversity and inclusion issues in the legal profession in Latin America. I bring you greetings from our board and our chair, Mark Firestone, and we have two of our board members here, Rick Mead from Prudential Financial and Madeline McDonough from Shukhardi and Bacon, as well as several of our advisory board members, Barrick Eccles from Kirkland Ellis, Luisa Menezes from PMI, and Gabrielle Brown from the New York City Bar. Ours is a labor of love. We look at diversity and inclusion in the profession, not just in terms of a particular practice setting or a particular type of diversity, but in a thoroughly comprehensive fashion. This conference is one example of what that's like, where we're bringing together a very diverse group to talk about our common passions to see a more diverse and inclusive profession, where anyone with the talent and the aptitude and the drive and the passion can enter this profession and then rise within it as high as those abilities will take it. So we're delighted to be a part of this, and I hope you enjoy the conference. Let me turn the podium over now to Adriana Ospina from the Vance Center.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a big welcome to all of you here and to our colleagues in 13 Latin American countries who are accompanying this event via webcast. Una gran bienvenida a todos aquí y en especial a nuestros colegas que nos acompañan desde 13 países en América Latina por vía de webcast. Muchas gracias. Before telling you about the Vance Center and our Women in the Profession program, I'd like to give a special thanks. Many people here and behind the scenes, as you have heard my colleagues, have made this event possible. Our panelists who have had to work very hard to prepare. We've been very strict taskmasters, our moderators, our volunteers. But I want to give special recognition to Judy Hargrave. And let me tell you, she didn't know I was going to talk about her, and I didn't know she was going to talk about me. But It has been a lot of hard work, but it's been very rewarding. And Judy, your leadership, drive, and admirable work ethic has made this a wonderful experience, so thank you. The Vance Center, of which I am its Director of Strategic Initiatives, is a non-for-profit program of the New York City Bar Association. We are a unique collaboration of lawyers here and abroad, together with other partners worldwide who seek to pioneer international justice initiatives and provide pro bono legal representation to social justice NGOs. One of the programs I direct is Women in the Profession program, or WIP as we call it. As you know, and we'll discuss in detail today, opportunities and conditions for Latin American women in the legal profession remain limited by historical and structural bias. This is especially evident with regards to positions of leadership. Changing mindsets and practices is essential for women to enjoy equal access. One of the goals of the Vance Center's Women in the Profession program is to promote this change and further the advancement of women lawyers. Our program, which consists of a network of 19 chapters in 18 countries in Latin America, is managed by an international steering committee of 48 leading practitioners from these 18 countries, and we count with the amazing support of several senior women partners from the firms in the Vance Center Committee. In fact, we had a meeting this morning with the International Steering Committee, and we had over 30 people attending that meeting, and many of them are still here today with you. So thank you. It's an amazing, amazing program. Now we'd like to invite Madeline McDonough, chair and partner at Shuck Hardy and Bacon, to come to the stage together with the members of their panel. Para nuestros acompañantes por webcast, no se les olvide que cualquier pregunta o comentario nos los pueden enviar por medio de nuestra cuenta de Twitter, @VanceCenter. Gracias.
All right. Thank you all very much. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here with this group, and thank you very much to Judy, Sandra, and Adriana for all of your amazing efforts, and to Luisa, the inspiration for all of us here today. I thought I would just very briefly introduce you to the panel by name and title, and then we'll get into some of the specific things that each of these people is doing at their companies in diversity and inclusion, and they are all leaders in those efforts. First, to my far left, your far right, is the one and only Luisa Menezes. And Luisa is the Vice President and Associate General Counsel of Regulatory Policy and Strategy for Philip Morris International. And you get the second farthest award for coming today of the panel from Lausanne, Switzerland. And then to my near left and your near right, Jonas Brusas, the Vice President and Chief Counsel, Latin America, Mondelez International. And Jonas originally comes from Lithuania, but most recently Chicago, so not quite as far today. And then to my immediate right is the winner of the farthest distance award today, Carmen Roman, Walmart Stores, Chile. You come to us from Chile. And then next to you is Felipe Paez, the co-chair of GE's Legal Diversity and Inclusion Committee, originally from Colombia, but most recently upstate New York. Welcome, Felipe. And then to my far right, your far left, Valeria Chapa Garza, the Vice President and General Counsel, Latin America for Honeywell. And I thought what we might do is just take 1 to 2 minutes each, and if each of you could just briefly explain your role in diversity at your company, what drove you to that position, why you think it's important for you and for your company. We'll start with you, Luisa.
Thank you, Madeline. Well, my role in the company, that's a very big question. But let me start by saying that I was asked to look into the situation of diversity and inclusion in our company a few years ago, together with other colleagues. And then from there, a small movement and a very deep interest in the topic was born. Also, our general counsel is, very interested in the topic. He has done a lot of work in this area, and that has served as a big inspiration. So today in the company, we have a mentorship program, and I have around 11 mentees today. It goes every year. I get a new bunch of colleagues who are basically who would ask to benefit from the mentorship program, and we are committed to help others in the company, men and women, not only women, through this program. And I think that's my way of giving back to society, to the company, and to my colleagues in general.
That's excellent. And for those who just may not have made all of those connections, the General Counsel of Philip Morris International is Mark Firestone, who also started the Institute for Inclusion in the Legal Profession that Sandra is here from. Thank you, Luisa. Jonas, very briefly, your role at your company.
Hi, hello everyone. So as my title says, I am managing the legal matters and legal team in Latin America. I am really new to this role. I just started at the end of the last year, so I'm learning a lot about, the culture, the different ways of doing business, about legal systems. And to me personally, diversity and inclusion is something very important, and I'm a big believer in it. So this is another topic that I'm really exploring now in my new role, and which is on top of my agenda. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion here.
And once again, Mark Firestone used to be the general counsel at Kraft, which became Mondelez, and he had some hand in even naming the new company. So he's running through this room, even though he's not physically present today. Thank you, Jonas. Carmen, can you tell us a little bit?
Yes, thank you. I'm General Counsel in Chile, in Walmart Chile. I'm also the head of corporate affairs in Walmart Chile too. I think it's a very related position, and I'm glad to be there. I'm a co-chair in Walmart Stores Legal Diversity and Inclusion Council. I'm the chairman of the Legal and Diversity and Inclusion Council in Chile. In other terms, I do other things related with this. I'm part of an important association in Chile, an enterprise association where I'm part of the board member, and I usually work in this kind of matter too for Chilean enterprises. And I am, since a lot of years, I'm mentorship of a lot of women, a lot of cycles of women in Chile. And I really love to discuss this matter because it's part of our culture in Walmart. And we really appreciate the time that you have to discuss this matter with us because of the importance that it has.
Thank you, Carmen. Felipe?
Thanks for having us, and good to see you all here. I'm Felipe Paez. I'm originally from Colombia, as it was mentioned, from Bogota. Although I've been here so long that I'm definitely a gringo, so make no mistake about that. Thanks for having GE as part of this panel, and I'm here accompanied by Trish O'Prey, who's also part of the Diversity and Inclusion Council at our legal department, which we call the Global Law and Policy Division. And the way that I became involved with diversity, other than my personal background, is because we have this council, which has been dedicated now for over a decade, specifically to diversity and inclusion topics. And the way that it's structured is that we have co-leaders. I'm one of the co-chairs of the council. And then we have dedicated committees with members that are screened and specifically assigned by their GE division general counsel to the post. So it really is something that needs to be done, but it's really looked at as an honor within our ranks to be selected to be a member of the council at any level, but even more so to be a chairperson of one of the divisions of the council, which includes outside counsel, it includes retention and development, communications, and benchmarking. And now recently we've added an international committee to the council. So our focus really and the positioning within the company is part of Global Law and Policy's interest in this topic beyond the company's interest, because the company has, especially from a US-centric perspective, a lot of interest in diversity and inclusion, but I would say more and more we're trying to focus globally as opposed to the US-centric thinking about diversity and inclusion, and that really means looking broadly. And within global law and policy, that meant not only looking at our fellow attorneys, but looking at our colleagues who are compliance professionals that are not attorneys, that do a lot of incredible, important things for us and with us, government relations personnel, and also our environmental health and safety, which is part of one big global law and policy family of about 1,500 plus at General Electric. So that's the context for us.
Excellent, that's great. And Valeria, you come to corporate diversity and inclusion efforts from a very different type of background.
Yes. So I'm a law firm attorney turned general counsel. 7 years ago, after 10 years in an international firm, I joined Honeywell without knowing that some years later I would become a pain in the ass for law firms. And I'll explain why in a second, and I say that with con cariño. So when I joined Honeywell, it was the first time that the leader, in this case, our global general counsel, was a woman. In the law firm that I worked with, while we had some women, but, it was mostly like, Claudia Prado, I worked at Baker & McKenzie. Majority of males. So it was very interesting to me when I joined Honeywell, because for the first time I heard about this concept called stay-at-home dad. I was like, wow, what a nice company to work at, where, the chief counsel actually, is the main breadwinner and has her husband take care of the kids. That's kind of nice. And so being at Honeywell, further encouraged my commitment to diversity and inclusion. For me, it became an advantage to be triply diverse. As a Hispanic woman, member of the LGBT community, our general counsel invited me to form a part of this LCLD, Leadership Council on Legal Diversity, which is a very cool organization based here in the US, formed by general counsels and managing partners of important law firms and corporations. And I was a fellow in 2013, and I saw that model where general counsels and law firms are working together towards really changing the statistics and making lasting improvements that have an impact and that really make a change so that more diverse attorneys can reach these leadership roles. And so with the support of Honeywell and my general counsel, Kate Adams, now my boss, I founded, along with other general counsels and law firm partners in Mexico, an NGO called Abogadas MX, where we work towards having more women in leadership roles. And how we do that, it's through, awareness and training, but, also very important, mentoring, and bringing men as part of the conversation, right? Because diversity and inclusion is not just gender specific, but in our Latin America countries, it is very gender specific. So we have to start with this gender thing, before getting into the other minorities. So anyway, as chair of Abogadas MX and also within Honeywell, I'm part of the Law and Government Relations Diversity and Inclusion Council, where we work on different fronts. We'll talk about that a little more. Fully committed to the cause. I'm very happy to be here and share some insights with my colleagues.
Thank you so much. And you mentioned the triple intersectionality of minorities and diversity issues. And I thought, as we talked about some of your company's D&I initiatives, if you could talk about how you define a minority or define diversity within your company practices, that would be helpful too. And I thought we might start with Carmen, because I think you've got some really specific ideas for your outside counsel, including Latin American law firms, and it might be helpful to hear what those are.
Thank you, Madeleine. Well, for Walmart, Walmart is deeply committed with the diversity and inclusion. For Walmart, it's part of our culture. And what happened in Chile is very delayed in this kind of matter. So when Walmart goes to Chile and understand that something happened with this, it was very important for Walmart to try to promote these ideas, the diversity and inclusion, the flex time works, and others, because for women it's important that any person have the same options to be in the legal services. How Madeleine is saying, anytime that Walmart contract a law firm, takes time to have a meeting with them and to explain why this is part of our main values. Yeah? There's not just words, this is as our principles. So we take the time to be with the different law firms that are participating in the legal services, and we explain that we have an outside council guidelines. This is the outside council guidelines, and this is part of our core. Why I am saying this? Because this is part of our core business. It's not just our value, it's not just our principle. We do this because we think that we can have better results if we live with this kind of value and this kind of position. We have a lot of information here regarding diversity, inclusion, sustainability programs, and what we want is all the community of our law firms be part of our programs. And in that sense, if you want to be part of the Walmart Legal Services, you need to commit with this. And every year, we are measuring that. There's not just words. We are measuring that because any year we are talking with them by person, we are sending some surveys, and every year we propose some law firm for an award, a special award, and the award is the commitment with this kind of ideas. And at the beginning, it was very, very, very difficult. Very difficult, and very difficult because Chile is not prepared for this kind of conversations. It's not prepared. But with the years, we think that they are advancing a lot. They are very thankful about this. Sometimes, if we think that we are a company in Chile with more than 50,000 of associations, we have more than 50 families that work related with us, and more than 1,000 of persons working indirectly with us. So we have the power to convince and the power to contagiar, I don't know how to say, to affect all the people with this kind of culture. Because this is culture, and this is the most important thing. It takes time, it takes a lot of conversations, it takes convincement. That is very, very important, because if the top of the law firm, because if the partner are not convinced with this, it's too difficult to advance in this kind of matter. And one example of our programs that we have is we defined 3 years ago with people from Walmart stores, Gretchen Bellamy. We defined a special program with law students in Chile. We selected a student from 2 universities for be part of a program, of Walmart program, with some kind of tools, with English, with mentoring, coaching, and with a network, very important network, be like a shadow program. And that was very, very important, because we selected a law student with some kind of characteristic, with social, economical difficulties, with gender and other things. And the good thing is, after 3 years, we have the best students working in our law firms, because the main law firms that work with us were the mentorship of them, the mentorship. So we think that they growing up with us, they were connected with us, with our work, and finally, at the end of the program, they are part of this community of our law firms. They work on the same law firms, and they have the opportunity to grow faster than if they are alone in this profession. So I think that I have a lot to share with you, but this kind of opportunities needs convincement, need commitment, and needs your time to advance in these matters.
Thank you. And kind of picking up on that, Luisa, I wonder if you could compare and contrast a little bit of what PMI does in Latin America and also how you define diversity, where you are in your initiatives, and maybe where you're headed.
Okay, thank you. So we have a program going on with the law firms that work with us in Latin America and Canada who wanted to participate. So it's not a mandatory program. We have some mandatory basic requirements in our guidelines for outside counsel as well, but we decided to go a little further and try to move the needle and to really, by trial and error, try to find the right approach and the right balance with the firms that we work with throughout Latin America and Canada. So we gave a lot of thought to how even to start, how to approach the topic, because, as we just heard, it's a difficult topic, and due to cultural and traditional ways of living and being, the topic in Latin America especially was still, not very known, and we had to raise awareness. And also we had to raise awareness internally. And internally, we focus mainly on 3 aspects of diversity. We've been focusing on gender balance and achieving a decent gender balance in the company. We've been focusing on inclusion of multicultures, because we are a truly international company, and we felt the need to really, raise awareness to differences in between cultures and how best to take advantage of that and how to integrate everyone. And then the third aspect is multi-generational aspects, because we reached a point where today in the company we have 4 different generations working in the company, and that creates a whole sort of other area that you have to look into. But when we went to thinking about how to approach the topic with law firms, especially in Latin America, we opted to cover first gender balance, and also a little bit of, the people with disabilities aspect, not only in the legal profession and how to accommodate lawyers with disabilities, but also clients. Would the law firms have offices that would enable people with disabilities to come forward and to be clients of the company, of the firms. So we focus on both, but the most effort so far has been on gender balance. We created this program, which is kind of based on somehow a competition between the firms. So we compare firms through surveys every year, and we see where they are. They are supposed to address both structural barriers inside the firm and invisible barriers, such as unconscious biases. So we put together several trainings for the firms. We started with the partners, of course. Again, if you don't convince the partners, you go nowhere. And it's, an iterative process. You make some steps, and then you build on those and you move forward. And we asked firms to focus on specific areas that we believed would move the needle within, time in terms of structural barriers. So, for example, would they have policies in writing on diversity and policy, diversity and inclusion or not? Were they training lawyers? Would they have training sessions, open sessions inside the firm to generate, curiosity and interest in the matter? Did they participate in conferences? Were they sponsoring the topic in their own countries? How was their organization, how did they compensate their own lawyers? Did they take into account biases when they were going through recruiting, for example? Did they have any specific programs and measures and processes in place? And so on and so forth. And then we did a whole sorts of trainings in terms of building awareness to unconscious bias, and we went there and we kind of shared the trainings we have in-house. So we didn't go further. We just said, okay, what materials do we have, and let's start a conversation. And I think that really helped the law firms to grab we grabbed their attention, and they saw really the advantage of working on the topic. And also a lot of the associates, once they were brought into the room and were part of those discussions that we were having with them, they really totally embraced the topic. And somehow a little internal movement started in some of these firms, which was very nice to see.
So it sounds like you're working directly with the Latin American law firms to develop kind of a platform and a process for improving diversity and inclusion efforts. Has that reached a stage where there are carrots and sticks about this yet, or is it still at the evaluating and learning stage, or just wondering where you are in the process?
I think now it's more of a carrot. No, we're not at the stick phase as of yet. I think you have to be careful because, again, it takes time. I mean, you can't hope that all of a sudden your statistics change from one year to the other, right? So provided you see some progress, that you see commitment within the different topics that we cover in the program, I think that's already very good. Some of the firms started receiving awards from other organizations where before that was not existent. And so, I think that's already very good. Of course, you want to see that translated into real action. But for example, I know of firms that went back and they looked at their compensation, for example, and they reviewed the pay to make sure that men and women in the firm were, being paid equally. Which, as you know, is a whole topic on its own, and it goes across businesses. It's not only, a law firm issue. It's, a company issue as well, in many senses. So when you see these things happening, firms sponsoring conferences like these, trying to push the topic within their own communities, their own societies, having mentorship programs, for example, and things like that, then you see, okay, they are getting it, and they do it because they believe in it and not because you're imposing on them to doing it. So I think that's the stick, maybe if we see that, there's a firm that really doesn't do anything about it, and maybe that's not the type of people you want to be associated with, but, that's it. But yeah, but I think we are in the, honeymoon phase still on the topic.
Thanks. Let's go to Felipe. At GE and the group of companies that you work with at GE, what sorts of initiatives have you started? Where are you in the process? And do you see some obstacles, internal and external, that have been challenging?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that it begins with a recognition that no individual has an answer to this because no individual is looking at it from the same angle. So I would say as recently as maybe just a couple of years ago when we had discussions of this, even at the senior leadership levels, there was too much of a tendency to start the discussion about diversity and inclusion and have representatives from Latin America or other regions disconnect a little bit from the discussion because the discussion was, albeit maybe a little too often, looked at through that U.S. lens. So for us, we're going through the process over the last 2 years of trying to re-engineer the diversity and inclusion program so that it truly is inclusive, as I mentioned earlier, globally, which means largely in Latin America, but also in other regions, to look at it in the way that is most relevant for the local jurisdiction. And to recognize that that this is all about a kind of a nexus of, as Carmen was saying, business imperative with that higher level that the legal profession always holds itself at for a good reason, right? I mean, even looking at this building that's here, which is an amazing place, this professional obligation that I think we all feel to set and follow moral and social standards that really are trying to move society forward, right? But you can't define that from just one country's point of view. So yes, the balance is for us in the US to work with our colleagues in Latin America and other regions along these lines without taking the foot off the pedal of what we do need to achieve in the United States. And we do it, as many other things in General Electric, and I think most of these companies, largely with the use of data, right? Because we really believe that that is a critical aspect, not the only one, to look at with regards to where we are and where we're moving towards. So I introduced Trish O'Prey earlier here today. She leads the part of our council that manages the interface with that data. And by the data, that means that our law firms, and some of you who might be here representing those law firms know about this, when you're booking entries that you've done work for General Electric through the billing system, you're asked to enter demographic information. And we encourage all of our firms to enter this so that they get credit for their diversity efforts and their diverse representation on our files. We're working on how to do that more globally. And it's definitely a journey. There was a comment made that the numbers go up and down, and it's not always just about the numbers, but the numbers do enable a discussion, and they do enable the carrot type of discussions, but also, I wouldn't call it necessarily a stick, but a challenge. So there has to be a clear alignment with a shared mission. And to me, it all comes down to leadership. We're very lucky that we have in Alex Dimitrieff, our overall general counsel, really be a huge champion in this. You need, I think, to have that internal credibility from your most senior leadership, to have not just somebody who will sponsor your efforts in diversity and inclusion in Latin America or anywhere, but to champion them. Our challenge at the D&I Council is that we have to try to keep up with Alex. It's not us asking him for help. And he has individual meetings with law firms. And Josie Jardim, who's in Brazil, watching this, I hope, she also has meetings with the law firms. And it really comes down to local leadership and what we're looking for through their eyes, what Alex is looking for, what Josie's looking for, what we're all looking for, whether or not we're related to the council, is we're looking for results, but we're looking for results in the right way. And that usually means looking at a law firm's programs, as was described earlier as well. Not just do you have a policy on this or do you have some thoughts on this, but what actions are you taking and how can we partner? So not just finger pointing, but how can we partner? How can we give you some ideas as to how you might think about this? We deal with a lot of law firms and we see a lot of models. So a great example that we're very proud of is earlier this year we had a summit, not that far from here in Crotonville. And we invited, out of our top 30 law firms by spend, the top 5 that we thought were most deserving with regards to how their programs stacked up with diversity and inclusion, not just their numbers with us, but their internal programs. And then we rewarded the top firm, which ended up being Reed Smith, congratulations to them, on their performance due to the strength of their programs. And so, again, not so much a finger-pointing exercise and too brutal of a data analysis, but to use that as a vehicle to have the type of conversations that can help us look at this topic and ask the tough questions. Like, for example, and I'm sure this will be touched upon, is this really a fair component of performance from the law firm's perspective looking into us? And we think, yeah, absolutely it is, because it all comes down to opportunity and development in the legal profession.
Do you still find, and this is open to everyone on the panel, but do you find sometimes internally or externally with law firms that they think diversity and inclusion is all well and good, but really deep down we need the best substantive lawyers and this diversity thing is just sort of extra or on top? I'm just wondering if you find that kind of pushback, or if you have, how you've dealt with that. That's open to anybody on the panel. Maybe a tricky question.
I do think that Latin America firms are not quite there yet. They think they are, particularly those that are part of international networks. My experience, because it is still very cultural and ingrained, they have the programs and they say, I'll give you an example, flex time. They say, okay, I have flex time, and they pride themselves with that. But in reality, what happens in practice is that women are set aside for the larger deals and hence not given the same opportunities as men to develop certain skills that you only get working in more complex deals, for example. And so I do find that there's a lot of lip service with firms in Latin America still, and I would say that, you know, out of experience of managing 27 firms in the region, and a lot of them are very committed, but again, like Felipe was saying, if there is no alignment from leadership in case of law firms with the managing partners and, you know, the law firm partners, which are still a majority of men, I don't know that change can really trickle down. You know, so firms need a strategy, not just a written plan, and they need to really put their money where their mouth is, and they're not doing that, in my experience, yet. Or at least not in a way that will really change the landscape of our legal profession in terms of having more women in leadership roles. So that's my 2 cents.
And at Honeywell, what are you doing specifically to try to attack that or really bring them along?
Well, because if you do things at a macro level, you can have all these great conversations and again, take a look at the statistics or numbers through surveys if you have the resources to do that. I mean, companies like Walmart and GE, I hear, you know, have people devoted to keeping track of that. We don't do that. I mean, we don't have something that are, you know, resources or people that are specifically devoted to keeping track of that. We do it more at the micro level. So what we do is, for example, we will have, in the US here, we have a secondment program for, you know, minority attorneys. What we do in Latin America is we ask firms, and this is something that I took up on 7 years ago when I came in, and I saw my roster of firms. Only in the case of Colombia, with my good friend here, Paula Samper, the rest of our relationship partners were male. And so I asked each firm to appoint a female that was not necessarily a partner, but an up-and-coming female associate. Proud to say that in one case, she is now a principal of that firm, and I think in large part through the development that she had in managing a client like Honeywell. And so that's what I mean when I say we do it at the micro level, so, you know, trying to mentor the attorneys that we work with, right? And so, you know, for instance, I see sometimes in firms that they don't give the female associates the opportunity to look at the statement, at the invoices. Yeah, you know, and that's a large, that has a lot to do with learning how to manage a relationship with a corporate client. And so if you really want a rounded law firm attorney, you know, you need them to also understand what it means to manage the relationship with corporate clients. So, you know, we encourage firms, firms and the partners to have the lawyers the main lawyers, which are mostly women working on our deals, to also get involved in managing, you know, our relationship, because it's it's a learning that they have to have also to be partners, we think. So that's some examples.
Very helpful. Jonas, what's been your experience at Mondelez, and how are some of your initiatives working and maybe still in process?
I think, first of all, I have to say that I'm really impressed with, you know, all the programs that I heard from my colleagues. It's really impressive. While, you know, we have really strong diversity and inclusion program within our company. In Latin America, we're just starting with this initiative, or about to start, so I'm still preparing myself and the team how we will approach outside counsel. So for me, it's really very valuable what I am hearing from all of you here today. And to me personally, you know, when I thought about diversity and inclusion, to me it means, you know, just being a human. You know, it's humanity, it's human rights, it's equality, and also if you think from a business perspective, so I think it is also very, very well proven that diversity and inclusion brings innovation. It also brings different perspective and creativity. So, you know, if you would just think about it, it's like, it should be like normal state of mind or being. But I must admit that we are not there yet. And therefore, of course, diversity and inclusion programs are important. It is important to talk about this. And I see those programs as a journey, which, you know, most probably doesn't have the end state goal, or maybe it has, but the goal would be the point when it would not be ever raise a question, or it would be a totally normal state of our the way of doing business and the way how we live. And I think to get there, our programs, they need transition at this point from just being, you know, about written policies and having senior executive appointed to oversight the program. I think this is something at this point where it has to be included and it has to become and associated with the strategic business goals of the company, and not only of the company, but also of the law firm. And it has to be much broader. I believe that all employees and everybody in the organization has really believed and has to live with this, so that it cannot be, you know, finger pointing what he is or she is responsible for that program, and, you know, my business is done here. And I think it is still a way to go there. And while at Mondelez we work a lot on empowering women at work, and I think that we're on a good path, but we still some way to go ahead. And in terms of working with the law firms, you know, what I would expect, or the way I'm thinking. So first of all, you know, I really would like to have an opportunity to work with minority lawyers, whether, you know, today we are talking about gender, and what I noticed through my first month in Latin America, gender is really important topic when working with outside counsel. I haven't met yet a women partner. And so for me, it's important.
There are a few right here
Yeah,
who would love
I know.
to talk with you.
Yes, so. And so to have this opportunity for me is important. And this is what, of course, we will be talking to our business partners, to our law firms with who we work. And also another measure, which I think is also important, is the pay. It's the rate. Mm-hmm. Because what I was also reading a lot, that, you know, there is still this disparity in compensation, which I believe is really demotivational and doesn't help. So to me, it would be those two factors working with the firms. It's the availability of lawyers, of senior partners, and compensation.
Excellent. Well, I know we need to leave time for questions for the people in Latin America who are joining us via YouTube, but I did ask each of the panelists in our preparation calls, and I should just say we had a couple, and they could have gone on for a week. Everybody had lots of good ideas, and it was really very fun to learn what each of you is doing. But I did ask them each to come up with one thing, if they could, for a takeaway or a challenge for the people here and the people on YouTube, whether it's in a corporation or a law firm, but something that you could actually take back with you and, you know, get some action or use as a challenge on diversity and inclusion. So who'd like to start on that? Carmen, you look like you
Yes.
have an exciting
Thank you.
smile.
Well, I'm really sure that, especially in my country, but also Latin America, the companies are growing, are advancing more than the law firms, and of course are advancing more than the governments in this area. So the company have the push, have the power to advance in this matter more than the main authorities in the country. So we are, our mission is very, very important. That's the first thing that I think is very important. And our profession is moving to other sides, that we have no limit to be not just lawyers. We need to be more executives and more open to be part of this mission. That is very important, because if we have this in mind, we can contact, we can be prepared to the next level in this matter. So, especially in Walmart and especially in the legal profession, we think that the metrics are very important, very, very important. And when I contract a law firm, I put some examples that I need to respect that law firm. For example, in terms of the overall law firm demographics, in terms of diversity policies, in terms of if they have some diversity and inclusion committee, wherever. But the final, at the end, if we don't want to work with that law firm because they are not part of our culture and they not work as we want to work, we terminate the contract with them. That's it. And it's very, very, very difficult to say, but this is it. I prefer to work with the law firms that are convinced of this and that are part of our culture in this term. It's the only way to advance. It's the only way. And sometimes, of course, the partner of the main law firms, and in Chile, in my case, are very, very disagree with this policy, but it is what it is. So we need to be very clear. We need to be very direct. And that's it for me.
So you stand by your core business integrated value of diversity and inclusion. Yes. Felipe?
I would say that it's really important for a takeaway that I would share that we came to at the summit in January was to make sure that you're touching upon diversity in as aggressive as a way as is required to remedy a gap that you see. And there's no need to be apologetic about that as long as you're transparent. But at the same time, you can't forget the inclusion piece includes all of the white males who you might be making feel like it's the diverse side versus you. And that's obviously wrong, and it's not what we're after. So the proposition really has to be that there's value in cognitive diversity. In other words, your background, irrespective of your demographic diversity, where you might have grown up, the way that you think, the way, your other factors, along with your demographic diversity, and that together those bring a richness, and that there isn't a path for having a valid discussion about this without there being an us versus them mentality or any kind of perceived or implied threat. I think it's important to be able to have, whether at the firm or in your organization, frank discussions about this so that you can develop action items without people feeling like private agendas have inappropriately taken over their professions.
That's great. Valeria?
Well, two things. One has to do with the collaboration that needs to happen between general counsels and law firms to really effect an impactful change. I really liked PMI's program. I would like to talk to Luisa more about it, because I think that having these conversations and actually giving the opportunity to firms to change the way that they have been, managing their talent. Because at the end of the day, for law firms, it's a business proposition. Losing female talent, it's disruption with their client relationships and more training and, recruiting more people. So I think that figuring it out together, law firms and general counsels, is something that, I encourage you to do either formally through programs like PMI or informally in your conversations with these stakeholders. And the second thing that I would ask everybody is to mentor someone. It doesn't have to be something formal, it doesn't have to be a woman either, but since we are talking about D&I here, I would say, mentor someone that belongs to a minority, that doesn't necessarily work in your same organization. That's really impactful too. And the other thing is be mentored. Allow yourselves to be mentored. I think in these mentoring relationships, particularly when we're talking about different generations, we can get a lot from the younger lawyers in the way that we think about these things and about the D&I efforts, but about work in general. So I would say, be open to mentor someone and to be mentored.
That's great. Jonas?
Well, I would say, and I would like that all of us could live, actually, diversity and inclusion, also not during nice conferences and when we talk about the programs, but every day when we make our everyday, even little decisions, let's have it on our minds.
Excellent. And before we go to the questions, we'll go to our spiritual leader, Luisa. Any
you.
challenges or takeaways?
I would say two things. First, be humble. I think I've learned a lot through this program with the law firms we've been working with. We have 40-plus law firms in the program. You can't just go there and, pretend that you know it all, and we don't. And we're on our own journey in the company as well. So the more you share about failures and successes, the better off you are in both sides. So we've been trying to really have a, very candid discussion with the firms, and we allow them to come with action plans that make sense for them. Sometimes it might seem that they are a little, too slow, compared to what we would hope in terms of a pace of progress. But you have to allow that, and each firm is different. They have their own difficulties, their own, issues with recruiting, with attrition. We had several discussions, especially on this training on unconscious biases is where I learned the most, because that's where things come about and where people talk about their issues. And we had, in one session in one country, law firms coming and saying, look, we really have this big issue with millennials. We don't know how to handle them. They come, we train them, 2 years of intensive training, and then they go. And what do we do with this? And we said, well, we have a very similar problem in the company. And then we started, a whole discussion about that. So to me, it's, really be open to share what works and what doesn't work. And allow time for people to make progress. I think that's important. And give back, like what my colleagues were saying before, mentor someone. You learn a lot from that relationship.
That's excellent advice. I think I saw a question maybe here's one. Yes.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Hi, we've actually got
We have to do it by microphone because of the webcast, so
All right.
there's two
and here
people
comes the
who will hear.
microphone. Here you go.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Mayral, a partner from Marval O'Farrell and Mayral in Argentina. I wanted to thank the panel, and I wanted to, it's a question and a comment. I liked a lot of your comments, and also Felipe, I was thinking about, we've worked a lot with PMI and how important it was for our firm to get a very direct message of what it was that the companies were looking at, because sometimes what you were saying about this global, what is the standard that the companies have to set, and all these questionnaires that we fill in, many times the partners would say, oh, it's a typical American companies asking us to have things that in Argentina you don't have, diversity of ethnicity, and it was a very easy answer, and they thought that was the issue. Oh, of course, we're never going to do well if they're going to ask us to have things that things that in our culture don't happen, and it wasn't that. It clearly was not that the issue, and we discussed it frankly and openly, and the difference that you all can make, in the legal communities of all our countries is enormous, because in many of the firms, you're going to find a lot of women partners, and we had been working and wrestling with the issues, but many times, you either don't have the budget, or every time we came forward with a proposal, it had to be, of course, we didn't have the same thing for men, so it was, well, very nice all this for women, but actually the men, we are not doing the coaching either, so let's do coaching for everybody. I'm not saying it's wrong, but what I'm saying is, it took time. And then when we had to sit down and think about this again and again and again, really your message and your transparency in getting together and saying exactly what it is that we can work together and do makes an enormous difference. And the impact is huge. And it happens in the different firms with the WHIP program that we've been working with you guys since 2007. It really has made a difference. So my request is please keep it up. That was all. Thank you.
That's excellent advice. And there's no question that the most direct primetime communication to partners in a law firm is what the clients want and need and expect. And when you back it up with terminating a relationship if they're not delivering that, that is, the very best way, in a way, to advance things. And, you are all kind of pushing against society and culture. but the corporations actually may be in the best position resource-wise and mission-wise to get that done. So you guys are all in a very opportune spot, and I know you're all very committed. Other questions from the room, and then you may have to help me with the video questions. Here's one. Oh, sorry. Here's the microphone.
Hi, I'm Sandra Gonzalez from Ferrer in Uruguay. When I was a kid and I was learning English, I remember when I started preparing my first international exam that my teacher in the first class said, "You are here to learn the strategies to pass the exam. Learning English, quite something different." How do you make sure as companies that we law firms are not actually checking all of the boxes to not lose you as clients and maybe win awards, but we are not actually making real progress?
Great question. Who would like that? Felipe, you look like you have a specific thought.
I do. I think ultimately you have to rely on the relationship holder. And this could be a challenge because sometimes you can have a firm kind of succeed in not convincing us or to have the right things. And I see two reasons why that might happen. One is that they come up with a business reason why they just cannot. You know, our foremost expert in this space just is not diverse. You know, this is what we can give you. This is the timeline. This is the quality you want. I know this is a priority, but do you want this team or not? It's a team you know we can do it. We're working on this in the long term, but what do you think? And then an exception is made and we move on because of whatever. So that's sometimes the reality of the situation. On the other hand, if the relationship partner works with the right level of leadership at the firm, usually there's a way to move the ball forward. So yes, that is the right team to handle it. The current team is not resourced along the lines that would generate a picture of diversity, gender or otherwise. But does that mean you just kind of accept it? Or is it possible that maybe the firm finds a way to adjust their timing so that they can bring in a junior member of the team who is diverse, who's not an expert, but they're showing that they're developing that person. And it doesn't take a lot of brainstorming to come up with things like that. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. It takes somebody on the ground that's holding the law firms accountable to ask those one or two additional questions about what more might be done, because we know that it can be done. And for example, Valeria mentioned that we have a lot of dedicated people to these tasks. Actually, we all have our own regular full-time jobs, you know? So when we say that to the firms, and I think that they get it, and they're saying, okay, got it, we can put extra energy into this. And Josie's another good example. You know, she formed, before we even had an official diversity program in Latin America, her own group of women attorneys in Brazil. So, hey, there's a way to get to this. You just have to have that deeper conversation. And I think on the law firm side, it's understanding that, again, it's not finger pointing, it's problem solving.
Okay. Another question? Patricia?
Hi, I'm Patricia Lopez Ofranc from Marlborough, Farad and Mayral again. Again, as my colleagues, I want to thank the panel. And now I have a little piece of advice to you, the general counsels. I'm totally convinced I am a preacher of unconscious biases and stereotypes and whatever. And every now and then I've gone through really well-crafted presentations on these issues delivered by someone who was not at all convinced of what he was saying or she was saying and was excusing herself for coming to the law firm to make this presentation. So make sure that the person who makes a presentation is passionate about the issue.
Thank you for that. I think that is, we discussed that a little bit before the panel about the importance of making sure that you have people in-house that are as passionate as you are, you know, the one who is, you know, sponsoring the program or your general counsel in the company, for example, in my case. But it's true that you have a lot of skepticism, including in your own organization. And yeah, I mean, these type of situations really don't help at all.
Yes.
I'm Antonia Stolper. I'm one of the members of the WIP Steering Committee at the Van Center. And this has been a fabulous panel. And I had a list of questions, but one of the things as we were working with our WIP groups, of which we now have 19 in 18 countries, so really a great interface, is that we're getting great interest from the multinationals who obviously at the highest levels of the corporations are very engaged in this. But as we know, and Valeria, I mean, all of you come from countries that have huge, very important national companies that in some ways are much more powerful and influential than even the multinationals. And I wondered if you have thought as people who are passionately committed to the issue, who are leaders in your own corporations on these issues, how you're thinking about engaging with your corporate colleagues who are not part of this multinational enterprise that is having such an important effect, and how we, as sort of the WIP community in general, but all of you here who are from Latin America, working with Latin America, et cetera, can advance this issue with the national corporations, where I think in many cases we are very far behind.
Great question, and I think Valeria had a thought on that.
So we're going to be starting a program, Antonia, called Adopt a GC. And so those GCs of multinationals like us will be adopting a GC from a national company and inviting him or her, mostly him, because mostly these companies have male GCs. They're going to be inviting them, him or her, to lunch every quarter to talk, to slowly, explain to them, but also develop a relationship to get them interested also to participate in these events. Because I don't know if it happens to you all, but it's all, it's the usual suspects. And the usual suspects are the multinationals, and we're always talking, but to get them slowly engaged. So this Adopt a GC program, we will be starting pretty soon. We'll let you know how it goes. That's one way to get them into the conversation.
Madeline, I'd like to give the chance to a question from our webcast audience.
So this question is coming from the Dominican Republic. It says, some Latin American law firms are led by men due to culture. What is your advice for those women who want to get higher positions within an organization in these situations?
Good question. How do women advance in corporations when so few are maybe at the GC level? Luisa?
I think that's a very good question, and I believe for that to happen, you need really to have an inclusive environment in the firm that enables that type of discussion, really. I see that's where clients can play a role, if you're talking about a situation in a law firm, such as the one that was described. And that's where I see really our role in the legal profession, to move forward the topic. And so hopefully to reach out to these type of firms and start a discussion and bring it, to certain good measures, really. Because otherwise it's difficult. I mean, if you have a firm that works in that way and there's no awareness whatsoever, it is really difficult to change things, and I think it's very unfair to put the burden on these women that are trying to understand how to progress in their careers if they don't even have the right atmosphere inside the firm.
Anyone else on that? Oh my gosh, we're getting the hook here. Time is called.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Madeline, Luisa, Carmen, Valeria, Felipe, and Jonas. This was amazing. Thank you very much.